As you know, in the previous lecture, we talked about how to teach language in our classes. I was specifically referring to English language teaching in our classes, and we covered the communication skills as a topic, how to teach communication skill as a whole in our class. We were talking about approaches and methods. So, friends, to introduce myself, I am Dr. Renu Tomar, and as all of you know that this is the second in the series of approaches and methods to language teaching in our classes. So, friends, we have also discussed how to teach listening skill, methods to be adopted in our classes as to teach listening skill in our classes. We have already dealt with that. Today, we shall be continuing with the methods required for teaching speaking skill in our classes. We already discussed quite many topics till date. So, today we shall be continuing with this series and discussing various other methods which you can take up in your classes as to teach speaking skill. So, friends, let us talk about one method which is brainstorming. What is brainstorming? Brainstorming means that let the students give ideas. And what is the importance of this particular method? The method gives us lot of ideas, because whenever there is brainstorming happening in the class, students as an individual, as a group will come out with very many effective ideas quickly and freely, and that will be able that way you will be able to generate ideas and information in your class. So, that you can jot down on your blackboard and accordingly ask the students to generate the speaking skill, what the student can be asked after you have jotted down those ideas on the blackboard, that go through those ideas and accordingly come out with certain material, certain content as per your interest and as per the topic required, and represent that in your speaking skill. That means expressing that in your speaking skill. So, friends, brainstorming is one of the topic which we should be knowing as well as practicing in the class, particularly now which level of students are we talking about. This method specifically goes really very well for the students of higher secondary level as well as senior secondary level, because at that time students are capable of giving lot of ideas. This method can also be adopted for the junior level, because at that level also if you will teach them, the students, to give their ideas, then naturally that is going to benefit them in the future. So, this is the good characteristic of this idea, that this particular method provide lot of scope for sharing new ideas. What that as a teacher, what you have to keep in mind? One, the time constraint. Don't give the students the whole day as to brainstorm. So, you have to limit the time, and that has to be shared with the student. Second, if you find or the other students find that the idea given by certain student is not very much appropriate, that does not mean that provide you any the students or the teacher that provides you right to criticize the student. No, the student is not to be criticized in the class, otherwise student will not be sharing one's ideas, and there the creativity of the student will be hampered. So, this is something as a teacher you should remember. Another method which we should be doing in our class is storytelling. What is storytelling? Storytelling, as we have discussed previously also, in this what the teacher does is that teacher tells a story, and usually that is a creative story. That means the story which is not usually heard by the student. So, you create your own story, tell in the class, and somewhere in the middle break the story and let the student express their ideas as to develop the story or give the beginning to the story. What we can do is, in the storytelling, either you state a story from the very beginning and leave it in the middle, or you just state or share with the students just the middle part of a story and leave the end and the beginning, and ask the students to provide the beginning to the story as well as end to the story, or one of them, depending upon the level of the students as well as proficiency of the student as far as this particular skill, speaking skill, is concerned. So, when the students would be coming out with the beginning or the ending, one thing, creativity will come. Actually, whenever we talk about communication skill, what is the basic to communication skill? May it be the speaking skill, may it be the writing skill, or may it be the reading skill. Particularly in the speaking and writing skill, the base is information. If you have content, interesting content, then that makes speaking skill also efficient as well as writing skill more efficient. So, this has to be kept in mind that for making students do well in the speaking skill, we have to provide in the class the scenario, the situation, as to be creative, as to give more information, as to express their ideas, and that too freely. And in that, what a teacher can do is, the teacher can ask the students to include some new character also, or to change the story, to give the story a new kind of a climax, and that may vary from one group or the other, or one student to the student. If we have the class of say 5 to 10 students, then naturally we can go for the individual. If we have class of 30, 35, then naturally it will not be feasible as a teacher for let the student, each student come out with a new kind of beginning, and that to be discussed in the class. So, that will not be feasible. What we can do is, we can disperse the 30, 35 or 40 students into group. We can form them into group 5 each. That means there would be 4 groups of 40 students, and naturally you can take group wise the ideas and ask a representative out of each group to come forward and share the beginning or the end of the story which the group as a whole has come out to be. Another method in the class which we can use in at any level, may it be the primary level, may elementary level, or may it be the higher secondary level or the senior secondary level. Let the students tell riddles or jokes, and make it a point that the riddles or jokes have to be told only in English. So, thereby the students will be working upon their speaking ability. What the teacher can do is, the teacher can ask that in the next class we shall be sharing riddles or jokes in the class, and students can come having written certain riddles or jokes, and those riddles and jokes can be shared in the class. So, when the students are going to share riddles and jokes in the class, then naturally they would also be working on the vocabulary. One thing, they would be working on the content, that if there is riddle, it has to be arranged properly. That means the structure of the sentence has to be appropriate. Similarly, if they are coming out with jokes, then also they will see to it that the jokes are stated in such a manner that all the students are able to understand and enjoy it. So, the laughter would be the agenda when the student will be sharing the jokes in the class. So, all these things have to be kept in mind whenever the teacher is taking care of the fact that that the riddles and jokes are being played in the class. Another mode which all of us should be knowing is discussion. What is discussion? Discussion is that you provide certain content to your students in the class, and after the content has been provided in the class, let the students hold discussion, and that discussion will be very much participative. That means the teacher would be participating in that discussion as one of a member, and the students will also be discussing about the information or content which has been shared by the teacher in the class openly, and trying to find out solution to certain problems, as well as trying to in the discussion in the group, they would be sharing ideas as well as trying to find out certain solution to the problem. So, that is very much relevant in the class, and as you know, the discussion is something which senior secondary level and higher secondary level students will definitely enjoy, because there they would be relishing the fact that they are being treated as equal, and they are allowed to think as well as their thinking or their ideas is being given weightage in the class. Then naturally, they would enjoy being in the class, and thereby as a teacher, your agenda, that is teaching them speaking skill, will be fulfilled, because students will feel more free as to discuss and come out with the more words as well as more content, and they will realize how to speak well. As friends, we have stated again and again, and all of you know, any skill can be improved only by practicing it more and more. So, if you are there to teach speaking skill in your class, so remember that provide option and space to your teachers as to speak more. More they will speak, more they will benefit from the teaching of speaking skill in the class. What is essential to the discussion? One thing, the topic, the students have to refrain from discussing the things which are not part of the content or part of the topic. And another thing which is important is that students can be allowed to agree and disagree. In this type of discussion, the teacher can ask the students to divide in small groups and even allow them to provide controversial sentences. For making discussion more interesting as well as making students more creative in their thinking as well as thinking bold, what we can do is we can come out with the controversial topics. For example, learning is best in reading or learning is best in traveling. So, this kind of a topic you can share in the class. Those topics which will bring out new ideas as well as in the group the student will be thinking as to defend their own base. The base can be learning is best in reading, or for the other group the base can be learning is best in traveling. So, both the groups will be defending their own parameters, and thereby they will also be trying to unravel new thoughts as to be the best in discussion, as to win in the discussion and as to present their case best. So, they would be doing more of learning, they will be trying to have more content, they will be trying to have more information as to prove their point. So, discussion is one of a mode which suits very well to the speaking skill. Well, one thing has to be kept in mind when it comes to teaching speaking skill in your class, that the group which wins or the group which loses, the teacher has to see to it that the environment of the class does not hamper any student or any particular group. That means, the activity should be, the method should be arranged in such a manner that you are fostering critical thinking and quick decision making. Students are learning to express and justify themselves, thereby they are not disagreeing with the others. What is happening is, in the class, that the students when they are talking amongst themselves, you see to it as a teacher that the students might be disagreeing with each other, but they are not being irresponsible, they are not being blunt to the others, and they are seeing to it that they are not being unpolite, they should be polite while disagreeing with the others. So, this is how you have to teach them critical thinking. Friends, let us be clear about the fact that thereby you are also teaching them critical thinking along with the speaking skill. One more thing you need to remember whenever we talk about the group discussion, that it is always better not to have a large group. Smaller the group, then naturally more students will be thinking or working upon themselves, because whenever the group is larger, what happens is that if you have formed a group of say 7 to 8 students, and naturally there would be 3 to 4 students who would be avoiding contributing in that large group. So, that has to be controlled as a teacher. For that, always form the students in a smaller group. Lastly, whenever it comes to group discussion, the aim has to be kept in mind by the teacher. Not just aim has to be kept in mind by the teacher, aim has to be kept in mind by the students also who are participating in the discussion. Students should know that why discussion is happening in the class. Discussion is happening as to promote speaking skill in the class. Discussion is not happening as to fight amongst themselves or have some kind of a disagreement or unpleasantness in the class. Let us have a look at the lesson plan for teaching speaking. It is of the intermediate level. as you can see, the kind of a material teacher would be using would be when what teacher can do is that let us have a conversation about the wedding. Wedding is something which all students have seen, and they can easily talk about the customs, they can easily talk about the clothes which we usually wear to the wedding, and they know what parting is, they know how the decoration is done. So, these information, because that is known to the student, what as a teacher we can do is that we can ask the students to come having written about these issues, so that you can speak about them in the class. What you can do is that you can divide the students in two groups. One group would be talking about dress which each member or the visitors or the guest would be wearing, as well as bride and bridegroom will be wearing in the wedding. Another group can talk about the customs. Then the third group can be talk about the decoration, the place, and all those things can be dealt by the third group. So, all those things can be divided in the class amongst the group, and the group can be asked that you send one of your representative and speak about these things. Or what we can do is, if there is a group of 4 students, then you can ask one student to speak one point, another student to speak second point, another student to speak third point. So, thereby in a group of 4, every student will get a chance to speak their point. So, one thing, objective of the lesson is to make them speak. So, to make them speak, that means that minimize teachers talking, students would be talking about that. Another, how is teacher going to be, what is going to be the role of a teacher? The teacher is just going to be a facilitator. Facilitator means that the teacher will see to it that all the students participate, and the content being shared is appropriately managed by the student. If there is something which teacher considered that is to be criticized, then naturally teacher has to see to it that that criticism should not be very blunt, and the minimal possible criticism has to be done in the class. Otherwise, you will be, as a teacher, you will be asked indirectly, informally, you will be asking your students to withdraw from next speaking skill class in your classroom. So, if you do not want withdrawal from your students, if you do not want students to shy away, then naturally keep your class environment very positive. Now, as I told you that what is to be done, the instructions have to be given in the class. As a teacher, it is your work, your objective as to provide instruction to the class. You have to divide the students in the group, and whenever you divide the students in the group, please remember one thing, that whenever the students are being divided in a group, then naturally see to it that the groups are formed in such a manner that the group members keep on changing every time. Like in a class, if there was a group of 4 students, then see to it that those 4 students are diverse, they are not working together again in the same group later on, because that will help the students to build rapport amongst each other, as well as that will also help them to be more informative, as well as share their ideas with the new people or new students. So, here you will be simultaneously working at group dynamics as well. As I told you that how the classroom discussion has to be happen. After this discussion, what we can do is, we can take a topic like, is the arranged marriage better or is a love marriage better. So, thereby students will be coming out with their new ideas, their own ideas, and they will be, what we can do is, we can divide the class into 2 groups, one defending love marriage, another defending arranged marriage. So, this particular topic which we had taken can be utilized again as to have the discussion in the class, and letting the students talk about their own viewpoints and thereby expressing themselves will be helpful. Another thing which is not to be missed out whenever we talk about this particular topic of wedding. Whenever you are talking about a wedding, see to it that all the aspects connected to the wedding are being covered by you. That means food, clothes, music, what was special about the wedding, how did the bride look, how did the bridegroom look, what kind of customs were there, who all were attending, where it was taking. So, all those things can be covered by them. And as a pre-teach new vocabulary, your work will be as a teacher to give them new words, new vocabulary, as well as provide the rubrics. If the students are small enough, they are not very well versed with the speaking skill, then naturally as a teacher you will have to provide them even the grammatically help. Grammar help you will be providing and the vocabulary help you will be providing. And or what you can do is that you can ask the students to come up with new kind of vocabulary, cross check those words whether they are appropriate in the context or not, and accordingly let the students give their best and learn a new vocabulary simultaneously, as well as learn how to arrange the sentences grammatically. Appropriate grammar is must whenever any kind of communication skill is being taught. So, one thing, if the students are knowing the speaking skill well, then naturally what we can do is that we can have the free talking in the class. If the students are not very well versed with the statements, what we can do is that one group can be asked or one line of students can be asked to speak, other to listen or complete by giving information. So, half the information by half students, half the information by half students, or they can also be allowed to read the conversation from the content. Either you prepare as a teacher or let the student prepare. So, if you have prepared, then let the student read from the content which you have prepared, and the other listening to it and repeating it. So, thereby the conversation will be taking place, speaking and listening would be taking place, but it will be controlled manner. That means, the students will just be listening and speaking, rather reading, and thereby learning the speaking skill. Here the focus, whenever we talk about the control method in teaching the speaking skill, is the focus is in reading appropriately. That means, with appropriate pauses, with appropriate pronunciation of the words. And in the case of a free, there the focus is more on information, on being more creative, on being more mature, on more content. So, because there the student is supposed to have mastered what we taught them when we adopted the control method or the semi control method. For speaking practice, we can ask them to tell their partner about the last wedding they went to, and with the partner they can discuss the customs and those customs which they appreciate or those customs which they do not appreciate. So, those kind of discussion can happen in the class. Remember, whenever you are teaching speaking skill in the class, it has to be divided, as all of us have done lesson plans for teaching in our classroom. Remember that you have to be very concerned and concentrated in your efforts as far as timing is concerned. That means, how the class is to be warmed up, how much time has to be given in warming up, how to personalize the lesson, then the pre-teach new vocabulary, giving them the required minute and then making them practice, and then providing them time for the free practice. As you can see from the slide that 10 minutes have been given to each stage. First stage is warm up the class, second stage is personalize the lesson, and third stage is pre-teach the new vocabulary, and stage 4 is practice, and stage 5 is production, that is free practicing. So, 10 minutes has been given, but 20 minutes has been given to practice. Remember that more practice you give in the class, more skilled your students will be. This lesson plan must have given you insight how to have the speaking skill in your classes. So, and you have also had a look at how the objectives of the lesson have to be done, as well as what kind of instructions have to be given, and how the subtopics have to be arranged, and what kind of a discussion you can have in your class. So, after having done this, let us talk about another skill, which is reading. What is reading? Reading, and do you think it is a difficult skill? It is definitely a very difficult skill, because those who have read even for years, even they do not find themselves confident as far as reading skill is concerned. Because as a teacher, we should be knowing what are the objectives of reading. One, to enable students to read without help, as well as make them familiar with the text. They should be able to read from the authentic text. They should be able to vary the speed. This friends is very important point, that the student should be able to vary the speed while reading. That means if required, then the speed can be increased, if required the speed can be lowered as well. And silent reading and with adequate understanding, these are some of the objectives which you have to take up. Depending upon all these objectives, you must have come across many words: skimming, scanning, extensive reading, intensive reading. What is meant by intensive reading, or what is meant by extensive reading? As you can see that the extensive reading is for pleasure, that means you read as to enjoy. And what is intensive reading? Intensive reading as to find out meanings or find out that particular content or answer to the questions which you are trying to seek. To give you an example, the easy example, when the student is dealing with comprehension during the examination or you are practicing in the class, what is the student doing? Student is not reading for pleasure, definitely the student is doing the intensive reading, and whenever the intensive reading is being done in the class, he or she is trying to find out the answer to the question. Friends, if you remember, whenever you teach comprehension in your classroom, what do? You ask the students to first of all go through the questions and then go through the content. Why is it so? So that the student is able to keep the questions in mind while going through the content. This way it will be helping the student as to find out answers to the questions, because that is the basic agenda of comprehensive reading or doing comprehension passages in your class, may it be from the textbook or may it be from the unseen passages. Here the students are taught two kind of skill, and these two skills are very important, which have to be learnt by the students: skimming and scanning. What is skimming and what is scanning? Skimming, as the word states, is just as by skimming you get the butter out of the milk. What do? You skim. That means what we are doing is we are trying to understand the passage so much so that we know the content so fully that we can also elaborate upon it, we can talk about it, we can further use it to have more related information accordingly. So, friends, you must have understand what is skimming and scanning. Scanning means scanning for that particular idea or particular answer, as you do in comprehension, as the student is taught as to deal with the questions in a comprehension passages. We were talking about teaching reading skill in your class. We also talked about the kind of reading skills which have to be taught as a teacher in your classroom. We talked about how to teach extensive reading. We also talked about the intensive reading. We also talked about skimming and scamming when it comes to intensive reading. So, friends, to elaborate further, let us talk about the methods you can adopt in your class for teaching reading skill. For reading skill, for teaching reading skill in your class, most important aspect is that you let the student read. Let the student read means the student should be allowed to read more. The simple method which as a teacher all of us have adopted for very small students or for the students who are not very well versed with the reading skill is that the teacher go in a class and read a passage, and after having read it, ask the student to read the same passage again in a similar intonation, with the similar kind of a pauses and with appropriate vocabulary as has been expressed by the teacher. So, for initiating this kind of a method, what as a teacher we do in our classes, that we do write the difficult vocabulary on the blackboard as well as pronounce them to our students again and again, so that they get to know how to pronounce those words. So, this is one of the method which all of us know, which is very simple as to make them read in the class. Friends, most important fact whenever we teach reading is that you teach students how to read for the pleasure along with reading for the meaning, as we talked about extensive as well as intensive. So, how to teach them reading extensively? Simple. Ask the student to read a story, and after of course, that has to be done back at home, not in the class. After having read a story, what the student can do is that student can share that story or abstract of the story or idea of the story in the class. So, thereby you will be making students read more. As they will read more, then as they will progress further, they will start enjoying, because reading extensively means reading for pleasure. When they will start enjoying reading, they will take up this as a hobby and they will read more. In reading extensively, one thing has to be kept in mind. Why do we read extensively? We read extensively so that we get the pleasure out of it. That means we miss out the details. We are not concerned about the details when we read extensively. What we are targeting? We are targeting the ideas, the content, the climax. So, because we are targeting on those issues more, so while reading extensively, you have to teach the student as to read with speed, and speed along with that read silently, because teaching silent reading is very important in the long run, because the reading, as all of us know, is something which we do in later on also in our lives. And this, if we have understood that how to read speedily, how to read silently, how to read for particular meaning, then the things are very easier for us in the long run, and this is the basic agenda of teaching reading skill to our students. So, here what is the purpose of reading? Let us be clear about it. For teaching extensive skill, reading purposefully, reading for meaning, and reading every word faster, reading silently. So, these are the objectives when as a teacher you are teaching them as to read, that means teaching them reading skill, and that too extensively. Another approach or method which we can adopt for promoting reading in our classes, which is usually discussed as top down process. What is top down process? By top down process means that the students are aware of it, that what is there in the content, and they can be asked to make connections between what they already know and what they are reading. That means top down process, you expect the students to have some prior knowledge similar to the content which they are reading, and they can be asked to utilize that prior knowledge as to build up reading further. So, they can link it, they can then enjoy it. While teaching them the learning and thinking skill, what we can do is that we can make the particularly if you find that the students which you are dealing with, they do understand what reading is, they do have some kind of understanding of the reading. What we can do is we can ask them to employ and strengthen both top down and bottom up. What is as we have already dealt with top down process. Top down process is that building upon your already existing knowledge, and bottom up means that you are discussing what you are reading at that point and building your knowledge upon that, talking about those issues in your class. So, as a teacher you have to enhance bottom up approach, that means reading a lot and utilizing the vocabulary which the person is reading in that particular content, and because the student will be reading the vocabulary, the most useful vocabulary, by the student will be learning strategies for guessing the meaning in the context. Because friends, reading does not mean that you have to try to find out meaning of each word in the dictionary. Reading means if you are able to make a guess of the of the meaning of that word while reading, then naturally you have that has served the purpose. So, that means while reading, vocabulary has to be understood in such a manner that that it has to be guessed. If you have been somewhere near the meaning, if you have understood the context, then naturally you have been able to read well. So, reading means that utilization of less of dictionary later on. This has to be taught to your students. How will you do it? Make them master the vocabulary. How can you make them master the vocabulary? Let them learn new words every day. Ask them to make it a habit what you can do is you can ask the students as a homework that every day whatever is being read in the class, they have to write the meaning of those words in the vocabulary in their diary, and next day that has to be discussed in the class. When the students will be coming out and discussing those words in the class, then naturally they will be more benefiting. So, these kind of exercises as a teacher you have to do in the classroom, only then you will be able to have the more results. Better readers in your class, because what is the target? Your target as a teacher is to have better readers in the class, because all our purpose is to improve the reading skill of the students. And another thing which has to be initiated in the class is to make them read the comprehension passages well. This is also something which has to be practiced in the class. How will you practice that? For as we have already discussed, the scanning has to be understood by the student and skimming has to be understood. That student should be able to scan for answers of those questions which are being asked by at the end of that comprehension passage. So, that has to be taught, the speed has to be increased, and appropriateness and the accuracy has to be introduced step by step through practicing. As we have already done that when we are reading in the class, what all to be done by the teacher. One, the teacher has to work upon improving the vocabulary of the student, keep on motivating students as to work upon their vocabulary on a regular basis. Apart from that, the teacher has to always every day motivate each students for reading for pleasure, that is extensive reading, and she has to simultaneously work on the intensive reading in the class. Intensive reading would mean that there the teacher would be teaching them how to scan for the information, or if required then naturally you have to skim for the information. In comprehension passage, skimming is also done. How is skimming done? Whenever in a passage the concerned question after the passage, if you find out the meaning of that particular word, then that cannot be simply done with the help of a scanning. That can only be done if you have understood the context, if you have understood the passage, if you have been able to make out the meaning of the word or words together. If you have understood only then only you will be able to give one word or one word response to the question which has been asked at the end of a comprehension. So, thereby during teaching comprehension passage, as a teacher you have to keep in mind that you keep on introducing the skimming and scanning method during the class. So, friends, one thing is clear that the skill which we are taking in the class, that has to be focused. The lesson has to be as we took one of example for speaking skill. Similarly, if the reading skill is the objective, then naturally you will have to decide your pre-phase as well as the during phase and the post phase of the teaching in the class, that is in the lesson plan for initiating reading skill and for promoting reading skill in your class. What kind of instruction would you be giving to the students while teaching reading skill in the class? One, you will be giving them instructions as to how to be fluent while reading the new kind of vocabulary and how to read with speed. So, reading rate improvement is also one of our objective as a teacher as to inculcate in the classroom. So, this thing I think is known to all of us, and this thing I have marked also in my lecture well, that in the reading skill the vocabulary activities have to be taken up, because one of an objective is also to make them understand new vocabulary as well as make them use new vocabulary. So, what we can do is whatever kind of a reading is going on in the class, we can ask the student to practice those new words in the class more. If they will be practicing more, then naturally that vocabulary will become part of their day to day speaking skill as well as day to day writing skill. And so, one thing is clear, that there has to be plenty of reading in the class. both intensive and both extensive. If you are focusing on intensive, then focus only on intensive. If you are focusing on extensive, then focus only on extensive, because objective of both the kind of reading is different. One is read for the pleasure, so there the speed matters a lot, understanding of the content matters a lot, just getting an idea about the vocabulary matters a lot, and when it comes to intensive reading, being very accurate as to understanding of the content is more important, as well as scanning for the information and skimming as to get the appropriate and exact answer is most important. So, for initiating as well as making the students practice, the reading skill has to be practiced again and again in the class. Most important thing, as we discussed in speaking skill, again I will be stressing upon in taking up reading skill in the class. Whatever method you take in the class, please remember that make each student read a lot in the class. If you will not make them read a lot, if they will not take up exercise, if they will not practice in the class, then do not expect students to read at home. So, you have to provide the environment in your own classroom, and this kind of environment will need to bring out the shy students forward, as well as improving the students who think they are good readers by making them understand that what kind of strength will be provided to their reading skill if they understand importance of various pronunciation, if they understand how to read various pauses as being stressed upon by the various pronunciation. So, understanding pronunciation and understanding the pauses is also very important. If the student has been able to master both pronunciation along with the pauses, that means the student understand where to take a full stop, how to read a comma, how to read if there is some inverted commas, then how to read inverted commas. If the student has mastered to that an extent, only then we can say that the student has become a good reader. And definitely friends, if the student has become reader, then making that student good speaker is easier for a teacher. So, we should always keep it in mind that whenever we teach reading, we have to teach reading skill to such an extent that they become perfect in understanding all the aspects of reading skill, and appropriate method has to be practiced for particular thing. For example, if you are just teaching them how to utilize pauses, then naturally you will have to have a lesson plan accordingly. The content will be more pause oriented, full stop, comma, inverted commas, they will be used as a teacher more, and you will be asking students to understand and read them more. So, these kind of methods have to be adopted, keeping that particular not just skill, but also sub skill in your mind. As we discussed in speaking skill, here also if the students are reading in the classroom, then do encourage them to have the disagreement, but that disagreement has to be polite. So, whenever you explain any differences, the students might be having, even teacher might be having differences between each other. So, they have to be taught that how to be polite while disagreeing with the other person. In the same class as well as in the next class, what we need is that we have to teach students how to focus in the same skill by increasing complexity. As an example I gave you of teaching them pauses. Naturally, when you have just started, depending upon the level of the student, when you have just started teaching them pauses, then you will be having 10 sentences arranged in such a manner that they have only one pause in each sentence. One has full stop, another has comma, then you have inverted commas, and accordingly make the student read it. But later on, in one sentence itself, you can be having very many pauses, different kind of pauses, and making them understand how to read for those different pauses. So, the task have to be made complex as the time is passing. Another thing, because reading skill is individual, but being a teacher, because we have a huge class, we have the 30 students or 40 students or 35 students in our class, then naturally we have to teach them in group. How as a teacher will you be able to teach them reading skill in a group? Simple. You form a group in such a manner that let one person who is reading being observed by the others, and the others may act as a teacher. And here the role of a teacher will be just to provide the facilitate the group activity, because one student is reading and others are just watching him, or the others are just providing him the feedback, then thereby the student is improving. The teacher will be facilitating as far as those group activities is concerned. So, you can utilize other students as resources in your class as to improve reading skill. And of course, the most important thing, see to it that whatever has been taught a week back, that is being utilized by the student today and tomorrow as well. So, keep on asserting the fact that whatever has been done in your class as a teacher, whatever methods were adopted as to teach a skill, and you really found that the objective has been attained as far as the understanding of that particular sub skill is concerned, that has to be practiced again and again after a regular gap also. Only then you will be able to confirm that the students have not only understood, but also using them in day to day life while reading at home. When we talk about teaching reading, one thing I really want to assert upon, we have to teach our students how to teach dictionary, how to read dictionary. And I have found that even at UG and PG level, students have not been taught as to utilize, as to use dictionary. What students know is that dictionary has to be used only when they are not clear about certain word. Dictionary serves multiple purposes. It also provides you not just the meaning of that word, also different kind of meaning. Like a word can be adjective, as it can be verb, it can be noun in different kind of a scenario. How it is to be utilized as a noun, how it is to be utilized as an adjective. Apart from that, it also provides the syntax of those particular words. So, the intonation is also being cleared by the utility of dictionary. So, friends, it is very important that as a teacher we teach our students how to use dictionary for their multiple benefits, not just to find out the meaning, but for multiple benefits. Of course, nowadays students are more techno savvy. So, we have tech dictionary also. You can ask the students to buy tech dictionary, which has lot many words with lot of examples, along with that pictorial representation also. So, thereby the students will be able to benefit with the by the technology as to have a look at the dictionary. And because whenever you see pictures and you find it enjoyable, then naturally learning is more strong. This is particularly not only to the student, but each one of us. So, utilize technology has to have techno savvy dictionary. Another thing, whenever it is not just using the dictionary which is important, one more thing, that they should be able to make note of new kind of words and use them in future. Use those words in different contexts. What is happening is that student has been asked to identify some difficult words in the passage and write them in their notebook. They do that. Along with the meaning, they also go for the writing the meaning. They are also asked to write the sentence on it. They do that. But usually what happens is that whenever the student is trying to learn the vocabulary, he will try to imitate the utility, the use of the word which was used in that particular passage. Like if the word was used as a verb in that particular passage, then he will make a similar sentence. What in a class as a teacher you have to do is you can motivate the student as to use that word in different form, as adjective, as adverb, as noun, as a gerund. So, thereby the student would be able to understand that one word can be used in different situations and for different purposes. So, this is something which has to be taught to the student whenever you are teaching reading skill to the students. And of course, reviewing of the study cards. This is also something which you can practice. This is one of a method which you can adopt. Reviewing card means what the students have to do. You can provide them cards, and they can be asked to go through those word cards along with their friend in the class itself, and try to work upon that particular word along with the friend, and come out with the not just the meaning, but also use that with the different purposes. So, these are the things which you can be doing in the class. Extensive reading, as we have already covered, that when you are talking about the extensive reading, then provide the situation to the students. What we as a teacher we can do is that we can refer certain books to the students, and when they read those books, they can be asked to share those ideas or content or what they enjoyed, or the abstract of that book which they read. The book can be either in a short story form or a abstract of or a novel, depending upon the level of the student as far as this particular skill is concerned. So, allow student to comprehend more meaning, allow student to read more, allow read purposefully. So, these are the things which should be objective of a teacher while teaching them reading skill. So, whenever we talk about extensive reading, what has to be emphasis on? Emphasis on reading purposefully, reading for enjoyment, and being able to talk about that book. So, these are the most important thing, and talking about the book means that the students have to be very structured while talking about the books. Being structured means that they should be able to elaborate as well as elaborate upon the book as it has been written. That means they should be understanding how the writer has structured his ideas while writing that book. If they are able to read that book in the same kind of a structure, they are able to talk in the same kind of a structure, then we would say that they have read the book appropriately. Another thing, whenever we are talking about structured activity, as inculcating structured activity, reading skill as a structured activity, one more thing, that students should be able to evaluate as well as critically discuss that book. Only then in the classroom, only then we can say that the students have not only relished the book, read the book, understood the book, relished the books, and he or she has also work upon further learning on that particular group, on that particular book. So, we have dealt with how to read for vocabulary, how to read, how to refer the dictionary. We have also dealt with what kind of methods have to be adopted for extensive reading or intensive reading. Now, let us talk about writing skill, the last but not least. It is also one of a very important skill which we have to be taught in the class. What is the work of the teacher during writing skill? Either depending upon the level of the student, as a teacher you can either ask them to ask them to write structured writing can be provided to them. What is structured writing? Structured writing means you provide the fill in the blanks. So, when the student will be filling the blanks, then naturally it will be easier for him or her to write. So, here the role of a teacher will to provide the structure of the content, and accordingly the student will be filling up the gaps. Of course, for writing skill also, as a teacher you will be providing them vocabulary, grammar and ideas. As I already told you, in all the skills, rubrics providing is the objective as well as work of the teacher. And in your lesson plan you will have to work at pre-writing, post-writing phases. So, for teaching writing, first of all it should be clear to you, and the student has to be explained that there are three kind of drafts of the writing, and the first draft which is being written by the student should not be taken either by the student or the teacher as being the final one. So, there has to be multiple drafts created by the student, only then we can say that the student is working upon improving his writing skill effectively. Another thing which is very important whenever we are teaching the writing skill to a student is that the student has to write in clear, concise and accessible English. How will you teach them? You can teach them by the most important thing is that by introducing common errors which the student will be doing while writing, and apart from that providing them grammatical help on the blackboard by writing them, and by providing vocabulary. So, dictation is one of the mode by which we provide the writing activities to our student. This is the method which manifest not only listening skill, but also writing skill of the students. So, dictation as a method can be utilized as a teacher by you as to inculcate writing skill in your classes. And most importantly, just as I talked in the reading skill, remember friends that writing skill of the student will be finalized only and only if the student is able to write with appropriate punctuation. That means, if the teacher is speaking something with appropriate punctuation, and if the student is able to write with the comma, brackets, quotations, semicolons, etc., only then we can say that writing skill has been understood by the students. So, friend, in today's lecture we discussed about the methods as a teacher you can adopt for inculcating various skill in your class. Friends, I hope you enjoyed the lecture. Any kind of a query, please write to us on our email. Thank you.